Hello, hello. So, all right. So I'm gonna jump back in here. Um, Look, and even like sort of judge the background. So it's very real right now. Um, yeah. Yeah. I don't know about you, but it's been kind of a crazy week with a lot of change and stuff happening, which is ultimately really great, but it's just being in the middle of it, which is kind of wild. But so my attention with these is that I want to reread the entire book this year live, and at some point do an audio book. But actually, the audio book of the Parinama Myth is really likely going to be of the short form version of the book that's in production right now. So for anybody who has the book, it is it's a textbook. It's a really big book. So, right now, for the benefit of people that might be, a little intimidated, we're developing something that is more of a handheld version of it. So stay tuned for that. So, the reading. So I'm starting right now. If you're following along the book on page 25, and the last reading was about so in the segment about interruptions and stressors. So it'd been the human rights and then the overview of the boundaries. And to be honest, I'm a little remiss to have them cut off, to have like the explanation of the boundaries and then jump right in on the seventh boundaries. But here we are. It's kind of weird. It's like I'll be reading and it just gets kind of, um, I don't know, just tiring, and so soon to come, I'm gonna actually spend a bit more time, working on the production of these, doing more of them, developing some curriculum, and doing some book clubs and building up some more resources for folks who are in the practice with this. It's been amazing hearing from people, and I really want to bring people together and give people the support that they need for this like incredible practice. So I'm going to start with the 7 hub boundaries. And if you're just dipping in right here, just like a contextual reminder is that like the human rights and human dignities and the boundaries, these are the framework for the interruptions and stressors that impact, the development of a hub. So anyhow, I'm just going to dip right in. No need for too much context here. So, all right. Yeah. So the 7th hub boundaries, the first hub, physical boundary. Your body is yours. You alone decide who is allowed to touch you. You choose where this boundary starts. It can be at your skin or it can be a parameter surrounding you. The more subtle aspect of this is related to social touching, physical closeness, and any other situation related to body autonomy, such as medical procedures, massage, dentistry. The physical boundary also includes respect for what Tawab calls material boundaries, your possessions, including respect for borrowing your things or your money. So this is actually really topical as so yeah, I try to be really careful about talking about specifics with people that I'm working with. And that's, just out of respect for people's privacy. And also in certain cases that there's like professional agreements that make, talking about like specific dynamics, off the table for this format. But, it's interesting that, so yesterday, um, okay, how to so I'll say, yeah, like yesterday there was like I'd say some discussion about fear of needles. And within that discussion, it was really, in the first hub and in the first hub chapter, there's a segment about like basically like medical procedures where we're restrained and held back, and how that can have the impact and create fear around the procedure, or perceived fear around a procedure where it's actually the restraint, the experience of the restraint. And those restraints aren't necessarily Actually in most cases aren't don't have ill intent, but for like a little body or a little person, or honestly anyone, to be restrained without really understanding fully why, and kind of being held against your will is pretty interrupting. So yeah, and so I think there's a larger conversation on that, but it's interesting that was something that came up yesterday. So, but I'm gonna move along. That's probably like a better conversation to have like with a person. So the second hub, the emotional boundary, is your emotions and feelings are your own. You're too sensitive is an assessment from someone who doesn't have the emotional capacity to hold space for you. It's not an objective assessment of you. It's a reflection of that person. Part of a healthy boundary in this hub involves paying attention to how people make us feel and making decisions about who we want to spend time with, people who are emotionally safe for us. Boundary invasion in this hub can involve oversharing and mistaking inappropriate levels of personal disclosure as emotional closeness. Also, there are people, psychic vampires, who drain our energy and take advantage of the so-called politeness of an inability to uphold this boundary. It's best to create distance from them, lots of it. Sex is the potent combination of both physical and the emotional boundary. Consent is required to cross it. Without consent, an action becomes an invasion and possibly an assault. An indication of interruption in this hub is second guessing your gut feeling and not acting on it. Interruption in this hub separates you from trusting your feelings, which can cause denial or distrust of one's emotions. Yeah, this one's kind of interesting because like in the preceding page that discusses boundaries as a concept, like one of the notions there is that it's like understanding our own boundaries is part of being able to understand and be perceptive of other people's. So these really go both ways. And and one of the things about having underdeveloped boundaries ourselves is it's harder for us to understand them in other people if we don't have them. Um, if we don't have them. So yeah. Yeah. So there's like a level of just being kind and patient with yourself as you look at this stuff and you bring consciousness to it and develop them. So yeah. Yeah. So the third hub is the personal power boundary. This boundary awareness is respect for time and energy. When it's healthy, we keep out people who lack respect for our time and energy, along with people who always need to be right by providing us. Or no, sorry, I'm going to reread that. When it's healthy, we keep out people who lack respect for our time and energy, along with people who always need to be right by proving us wrong. These folks will try to manipulate and dominate interactions using relentless attempts to overpower you and get you to do what they want. An invader of this boundary will show limited interest in your opinion, perspective, or the value of your time. When someone doesn't respect your time, it's an invasion of your power. Everyday examples are conversations and meetings that run long without consent, leaving you feeling drained and frustrated. Ooh, okay, this one's very topical for me right now because one of the things with the Parinama method with this book, and even things that have to do with my professional life, are that I don't want to gatekeep people. And so my willingness and openness to do things at either like a significantly reduced cost, give my time, give things away. One of the things about this boundary isn't just people taking it, it's giving it too porously. So, and this is what's very topical for me right now is that it's not just other people's respect for your time and attention, it's your own respect for it. And it's that upholding. And one of the things I'm experiencing right now with this particular third hub boundary is that I think I've been too permissive with offering people what I'd consider like, very high value attention and really high value advisement. And like one of the things with third hub in general is that like like the holding back of it, it sort of creates like a um what's the word for it? The word it creates like a backup, like a backing up. And so it's like when it breaks through, there can be like aggravation or agitation or overcorrection. So it's like, a lot of time, like a lot of stuff with third hub that has to do with like being respected. And once you're kind of like you've had enough, that it's like a burst. Or and this can be really subtle. This isn't just like they go kind of like nuts. It's just it really can be something that's just like just more aggravation or coming at things a little bit harder. But yeah, it's like the respect for your time. It's like, yeah, really, it's just particularly topical for me right now, especially as I'm making a lot of shifts personally to optimize that. I'm actually like finding myself being aggravated with myself and frustrated with myself and holding myself accountable about having given a lot of things related to my time and my attention to people who appreciated them to a certain extent, but not to its full value. So subtleties. Um, Subtleties, yeah, nuance. So, fourth hub, relationship boundary. This is the protected space of chosen social, familial, and intimate connections. Again, you decide who's allowed in. Like our home, it's a force field with levels of intimacy. Who comes in to visit and who lives here? There are people who come in uninvited and are oblivious to their invasions. These are folks we let in who cause distress in our lives. There are also those who are already in, such as family, who may look through the cabinets, judging and criticizing. In the boundary of your inner circle, you decide what type of access you're willing to offer so that you can know when it's been overstepped or disrespected. These invasions are painful, especially when people who cannot love us or do not respect themselves come into our inner circle and make us feel unsafe where we're most vulnerable. Yeah, it's a real one. All right. The fifth hub boundary is sound and verbal boundary. This is the boundary of protection from noise, negativity, and hostility. When we hear negative comments, verbal threats, loud noises, or yelling, this boundary has been broken. We should feel safe within our boundaries. And if there are words or sounds that make us feel threatened, it's the signal to create distance and enforce. Music that's too loud and people who yell are invaders. Sometimes this one is hard to trust and observe when we believe we're at fault for our preferred tolerance of noise and hostility, perhaps thinking we should be able to handle it. Classic thing with boundaries, by the way. Um, but these are your boundaries, and you decide what they are. Threats and the words you experience as hurtful are all outside this boundary that you get to determine and enforce. Yeah. Yeah. So, like, as the kind of commentary on this, one of the things with a lot of this section left a big impression on, or continues to leave a big impression on readers, and a very common sentiment to people that people express to me is that they're that this is it's like really like the notion of boundaries having all of these levels is really enlightening. And it has been, I've heard, many folks have told me that reading this section has led to conversations with their partners and people that they're in intimate relationships with, or, like, and even considerations of like their interactions with their children has been a thing. And as I'm reading it right now, I'm like feeling why that would be the case, because I'm actually experiencing like the re-realization of this of these concepts. Um, so the sixth hub is the visual boundary. So the boundary this boundary invades it. We'll start from the top. This boundary includes invasive eye contact and curiosity. Studies show that a conversation should have about 60% eye contact to be effective. 90% is intimidating and invasive. Another invasion of this boundary are graphic images you can't unsee, particularly when it's age inappropriate. Similar to the fifth hub, awareness of this boundary can create major shifts in what you're personally willing to tolerate. For young children, seeing intense images can be disturbing. As adults, sometimes we can feel the need to be tough and not enforce against invasions like leering and other intrusive eye contact, such as like terrifying images. Most of what enters our visual field is either consciously or subconsciously absorbed into our inner reference library. So awareness and discernment of what you want to put on your shelves are conscious acts of empowerment. Awareness of this can be particularly difficult because effective manipulation, mind control, and indoctrination can all fly under the radar. Social media algorithms are designed to keep us engaged and, as a result, break this boundary often without our conscious consent. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, I was, like, having a hard time, like, where, I was kind of bungling that up a little bit because I was kinda um kicking up a lot of thoughts and feelings that were both related to this concept and related just to the notion of boundaries. And yeah, I mean, as far as being like having authored this book and being what I'd consider to be a um pretty good practitioner of the Parinama method. There it isn't something, it really isn't something that is going to remove anyone from the human experience. So part of, a big piece of what the Parinama method is about, it's a manual for like better self-discovery, better humaning. And so, I mean, so the thing is, and one of the analogies I use with folks is the nautilus shell, which is it's kind of like as we evolve, we tend to continue to encounter very similar circumstances and situations. The things that we think we've already like evolved past or know better than will show up in a more complex, nuanced, intense, greater version of themselves. And I think it can be frustrating for people to experience that because like in a notion, like a very binary notion, it's kind of like I already learned that, so it's like it's done, versus which is actually like a real like more of a thought construct than anything, rather than just an evolution of an ability with a particular dynamic. And so that it's like, like slowly but surely we grow our capacity with it. And I think that, potentially, the dynamics that are repeating in our lives are, like woven into our destiny about who we are and what we're supposed to like do in this world. Because, I like one of the things as somebody who, like has worked as, a leader in executive capacity and all, number of other capacities, it's that um I don't know, it's just like like we continue to learn, and that if we're coaching people from this like a very common like the pedestal model where you're sort of like passing down the knowledge like you have completely surpassed the condition of being a human being, it puts a lot of pressure on ourselves, and it also creates um well, it creates a pressure within ourselves about that is pushing against the reality of the fact that we're like still very much human beings, no matter how much better we get at being at humaning. So, all right. Well, so we're about 19 minutes in, so I'm gonna kind of get right to it here. Um, so the seventh hub, intellectual and spiritual boundary. This more complex boundary involves all the previous six, affecting the questions we ask and what we believe. It it can involve spiritual invasion with guilt and fear, using religion to control and restrict um, we- behavior within doctrines of perfection and purity. People have the right to their beliefs, And when those beliefs are disregarded, disrespected, or undermined, this boundary is being invaded. An inconvenient truth for some folks is that all individuals have their own perspective, and imposing one over another's is a seventh hub boundary invasion. When the inquiry becomes protectively walled, when inquiry becomes protectively walled off, nothing new gets in, and life is reduced to an insular, limited experience filled with assumptions and assertions. Another aspect of the seventh hub boundary is the containment of thoughts, which, when agitated, can act like a shaken snow globe and appear to take up as much space as they're given. Boundary enforcement requires noticing a repetitive thought or worry and doing the challenging work of evaluating and addressing the fixation. By introducing awareness and applying perspective when a thought is consuming all available space, contain it by writing it down. Use the journaling practices for processing. See Chapter 11. Some pre-boundary relationships only require attendance, which isn't a particularly high bar to clear. When boundaries are observed, communicated, and upheld, they deepen intimacy with the trusted people who respect what we tolerate and allow in our lives. Children who experience lack of development and respect for age-appropriate boundaries in a given hub endure stress that results in the creation of necessary survival protections, adaptations, some of which become holding patterns or behavior that remains for decades or lifetimes, long after the initial stressors and interruptions have passed. So, yeah, so that's a segue into the next section here, which is the adaptations and holding patterns. And I actually have a little energy here. So, and that's a pretty good segue, which is like the interruptions and stressors. So as far as going back to the overall Parinama method, which is understanding what a hub is, understanding interruptions and stressors. So these are related to human dignities and boundaries. And then looking at how underdevelopment and interruption of boundaries and human rights impacts how we're formed. And this becomes the notion of adaptations and holding patterns. So I feel like this might be actually something that's better to read separately. Yeah, I think we've gone long enough. But I mean, just for adaptations, I might read just a little bit of it. So like a minute or two. So adaptations and holding patterns. When we experience stress from interruptions that is either intense and acute or low grade but ongoing, we adapt so that we can maintain safety, dignity, and belonging for our survival. But often without knowing it, the behaviors that helped us survive early in life can hold us back as adults. Adaptations and holding patterns are often maladapted outside the environment that caused them. In both childhood and into adulthood, initially our behavior changed, but sometimes, if the interruption was severe enough or went on for too long, the adaptation became a holding pattern that got coded into the physical and psychological reflexes of our body-mind. Children are completely reliant on the care of others and innocent as they adapt to what's required to survive. People who grew up in stable environments may not understand or lack compassion for adapted behaviors, mislabeling them as moral shortcomings. An adaptation is a behavior pattern of either inflating, overcompensating, or shrinking, avoiding, that protects a developmental dilemma within a hub. In each hub, there's a survival reflex that supports us in small doses, but it can become a shadow when it takes an ongoing fixated hold on our behavior. In the adaptations and holding patterns section in each chapter of part 2, I discuss the hub shrinking adaptation, inflating adaptation, and an additional theme or two related to the holding patterns and shadows. Whew. Yeah, that's good. I could keep going, but I'm not going to for today. I think I've gone on long enough. And yeah, it's and just one of the things that's interesting with this is that I can still feel there's like a break between when I'm right about to get on do it like doing these like lives, and then like even just how I feel in them is still a bit constricted, so that's something I want to keep working on. So yeah, I'm just gonna, and if you've gotten this far, thank you so much. And yeah, I absolutely love you for being along for the ride with this. And yeah, I'll see you soon. I'll definitely be seeing you soon. I can't wait for it. All right, bye.